You're a burden. Leave, my family said, kicking me out on my birthday. Years later, they showed up at my new condo. We're moving in. I handed them the restraining order. Their jaws dropped. You ever imagine getting kicked out of your own home on your birthday? That's what happened to me. No warning, no reason besides being called a burden by my own family. I'm Mike, 27 years old, and if you told me a year ago they'd throw me out like trash the day I was supposed to celebrate, I wouldn't have believed it. But here I am. I live with my parents, Dawn and Russell, and my younger brother Cody. The house wasn't great, small, run down, and honestly a bit gross sometimes. But it was home, or at least that's what I thought. I pulled most of my weight around the place, paying bills, buying groceries, even fixing stuff when it broke. You'd think they'd notice, right? Not really. Mom was always on my case. Plenty of Mike. When are you going to get a real job? Yeah, marketing's not flashy, but it paid the bills. Apparently, that didn't count for much. And my brother, the guy barely helped and acted like he was somehow better just because he had more followers online or whatever. I'm the one who kept the place together. Nobody cared. My 28th birthday was coming up. I thought maybe, just maybe, this year would be different. I even bought myself a decent cake. But then comes the day and everything falls apart. A few days before my birthday, I tried to keep things normal. Hey, what if we did something for my birthday? Just some cake, nothing crazy, I said to my parents. Mom barely looked up from her magazine. We'll see. Maybe we have plans, she said. Plans? On my birthday? That should have been a red flag, but I didn't want to believe it. I've lived there my whole life, worked hard, helped with everything. Why wouldn't they include me? Birthday comes, and I'm feeling decent. Got a bunch of wishes at work, even bought a new shirt, felt good. Thought maybe I'd get a cake or something when I got home. But when I pulled in, my heart sank. My stuff, boxes, bags, clothes thrown on the front lawn like trash. I ran up to the porch, hoping it was some mistake. Instead, I find my mom, dad, and brother standing there, watching. I asked, what's going on? Mom stepped forward, face like ice. Mike, it's time for you to leave. You're not welcome here anymore. I froze. Left on my birthday? What kind of joke was this? Dad just looked at the ground. Then my brother smirked. Maybe you should have thought about not being such a burden. A burden? I kept the bills paid and fixed the place. How was it a burden? But Mom said, it's not enough. We need the space. You need to grow up. No apologies, no warmth, just cold words. I begged to get my things, but they were packed outside already. You should go now, Mom said. And just like that, on my birthday, I was homeless. I didn't know where to go. I ended up at a rundown motel with a flickering neon sign, alone with my bag, sitting on that crappy bed. I just stared at the ceiling, wondering how the people who were supposed to have my back could be so ruthless. But that night, I swore I'd never depend on them again. The morning of my birthday, I felt okay. I went to work like any other day and got a bunch of happy birthday messages from coworkers. I even treated myself to a new shirt. I figured maybe, just maybe, coming home would be different. Maybe some kind of surprise or even just a card. But when I pulled into the driveway, my stomach dropped. My stuff, boxes, bags, clothes, even books were sitting on the front lawn, just tossed out like I was garbage. My heart started pounding as I ran to the porch. There they were, Mom, Dad, and Cody standing like this. It was all normal. What's going on? I asked, my voice shaking. Mom stepped forward, cold as ice. Mike, it's time for you to leave. You're not welcome here anymore. I just stood there, stunned. Leave on my birthday? What kind of twisted joke was this? I looked at Dad, hoping he'd say something, but he kept his eyes down, hands shoved in his pockets like he didn't want to be there. Then Cody smirked. Maybe you should have thought about that before being such a burden all these years. A burden? Me? I was the one paying bills, buying food, fixing up the place when things broke. How was I the burden? I looked at Mom, begging for some explanation. But she just said, "It's not enough. We need the space. You need to grow up." That was it. No empathy, no second chances, just cold, hard words. Tears welled up, but I refused to let them see me break down. "Can I at least get my things?" I asked softly. "They're packed," Mom replied, gesturing to the boxes. "You should go now." That was it. Happy birthday to me. I started loading my stuff into the car, hands shaking. It felt surreal, like living someone else's nightmare. I wanted to scream or cry or shout at them, but I didn't. I just kept moving one box at a time. When I finished, I looked at them one last time. Why? Why on my birthday? Mom didn't even blink. "Consider it our gift to you, independence." And just like that, I was gone. I ended up at a cheap motel, the kind with a flickering neon sign. Alone, surrounded by my packed boxes, I stared at the ceiling, asking myself how the people who were supposed to care could be so cruel. But that night, I made a promise I wouldn't depend on them again. That night in that dingy motel, I felt broken, not just from being kicked out, but from the realization that the family I thought had my back didn't. But sitting there, staring at that cracked ceiling, something flipped inside me. I made a silent vow of independence. I told myself, I'm done depending on them. I'm done feeling small. The next day, I threw myself into work harder than ever. I couldn't just sit around feeling sorry for myself. Bills still had to be paid now more than ever. Rebecca, my boss, noticed pretty quickly. I was burning the midnight oil, hunched over my laptop, emailing nonstop. One night, she pulled me aside. "Mike, we need to talk." I looked up, probably looking wrecked. She studied me with a softness I hadn't seen from my family in years. "You're going to work yourself into the ground," she said gently. "What's going on?" I didn't want to open up. She's my boss, not my therapist. But the words flooded out how I was kicked out, living in a motel, struggling. She listened, not judging, just listening. When I finished, she sighed. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I shrugged, embarrassed. I didn't want to be a burden. She smiled. "You're not a burden. Hey, I've got a spare room at my place. It's not much, but you're welcome to stay until you get sorted." I was speechless. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. "Are you serious?" "Of course," she said. "I know what it's like to be in a tough spot. Don't worry about it." Relief hit me so hard, I nearly broke down again. "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't mention it. Just promise me you'll take care of yourself." I moved into Rebecca's guest room the next day. Small place, but warm, clean, and quiet. Everything I needed. That first night, sitting on that bed, I felt a hole in my chest where my family used to be. But I refused to wallow. I threw myself into work harder, taking on freelance gigs, saving every dollar. Some nights I stayed up until 3 a.m., eyes burning, mind racing, not with self pity, but with plans to prove to myself I could make it on my own. Through it all, my best friend Dave was a lifeline. Even miles apart, he checked in, joked around, kept me grounded. "You know what would piss them off?" he said once, laughing. "You become ridiculously successful and rub it in." I laughed, but the idea stuck. Not out of revenge, but to prove to myself I didn't need them. And that's what I focused on, working hard, saving more, building my life up again. Once I moved into Rebecca's spare room, I knew I had to keep pushing forward. That small place became my sanctuary, a quiet spot where I could focus on getting my life back on track. I started taking on extra freelance projects, putting in late nights to save as much money as possible. Work was demanding, but I welcomed the challenge. It kept my mind off the pain of the family that had pushed me out. Slowly, clients started noticing my work. Bigger projects came in, and with each one, my confidence grew. Dave, my best friend since college, was a constant source of support. Even though we lived in different cities, we talked almost daily. He cracked jokes, asked about my progress, and reminded me not to let the past hold me down. You know what would really get them? He said one evening over the phone, laughing. You get so good, so successful, they can't ignore it. I laughed with him, but the idea stuck. It wasn't about revenge, but about proving to myself that I could rise above it all. After months of grinding, Rebecca called me into her office with a big smile. Mike, how would you like to be lead designer? There's a raise in it too. I was stunned. Are you serious? Completely, she said. You've earned it. That moment felt like validation, a sign that all the hard work and sleepless nights were paying off. The race meant I could finally think about getting my own place. No more living out of a guest room. But more than money, it was about reclaiming control of my life. For so long, I'd felt trapped by my family's judgment and expectations. Now, I was free to build something of my own, and it felt damn good. Just when I thought I was turning a corner, life threw me a curveball. One random Wednesday, right in the middle of a huge project, my phone buzzed. I didn't expect anything, but when I saw who it was, my heart sank. Cody. I hadn't heard from my brother or parents since that brutal birthday night. Honestly, I didn't miss them, but curiosity made me pick up. Hello? I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Mike, it's me, Cody said, sounding different. No bragging, no attitude, just something like desperation. I raised an eyebrow. What do you want? He hesitated, then told me about dad losing his job and mom spending getting out of control. They couldn't afford his college anymore. Suddenly, it wasn't about family or making amends, it was about money. I fought back a surge of anger. The same brother who watched me get kicked out was now calling for help? Sounds like your problem, I said, voice sharper than I wanted. We are family, Mike, he said, desperation clear. Family? I scoffed. You kicked me out on my birthday. Family doesn't do that. Silence fell. I knew everything I needed was said. I'm done being your safety net, I told him. Don't call me again. I hung up, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. It sucked that it came to this, but standing up for myself felt powerful. That night, I lay awake thinking about all the sacrifices I made for my family. Where had it gotten me homeless on my birthday? I decided I couldn't let their actions drag me down anymore. From that day, I focused on my future. Every time I felt the old guilt creeping in, I reminded myself of that call. They made their choices, and now I'm making mine. The knock on the door came at a peculiar hour, as if the world had paused just long enough for the universe to remind me who I am outside the walls I used to call home. I wasn't expecting anyone, certainly not them. Their faces wouldn't fit through the door frame without a bruise of memory snapping shut around my heart. I stood still for a second, listening to the street beyond my new apartment, the hum of a distant city life that had slowly grown to like. Then, with a steady breath, I stepped back and opened. There they were, Mom, Dad, Cody, standing on my porch as if the years hadn't passed, as if the past hadn't carved the gulf between us so wide the Atlantic would blush. My breath caught, not in fear but in a cold, hard resolve. I'd learned to summon when the job market felt like a trap and the rent was reality knocking at my door. Mom pushed a little closer, her smile practiced, the kind that never reaches the eyes. Hey, Mike, we need to talk. Dad hovered behind her, hands stuffed in his pockets, the same way he'd stood back on that terrible birthday when they made the decision to cast me out. Cody stood a step to the side, a mirror of the old confidence he used to wear like armor, but I wasn't buying it today. What's this? I asked, keeping my tone even, not letting the tremor in my hand betray me. You here for a family reunion or a weapon check? Mom's eyes flicked toward Cody, then back to me. We're here to talk about living arrangements. This isn't about forgiveness. It's about reality. Reality, huh? The word tasted sour on my tongue. I stepped inside, closing the door softly behind me, inviting them to sit in the living room I'd rebuilt with my own hands. the space that symbolized the life I'd earned back, one where I didn't plan my next move around their moods. Cody spoke first, the old bravado returning in a rush. We're not asking for anything except a fair shake. You've got a condo now, right? We could make this work, our family asset, your home, your responsibility. I let the sarcasm glide past me. First, this isn't your home, it's mine. Second, I don't audition for shares in someone else's life, especially not when I've already had to fight for mine. Dad finally found his voice, quiet but clear. We're in a bad spot, son. Mom's been worried. The bills, the tuition. We thought maybe if you saw, I cut him off. Saw what? That you'd use me as a cash machine with a smile you think hides the truth? You kicked me out on my birthday? Then you want to pull me back in with the threat of losing everything you never earned? The room felt smaller, the air thicker, as if the walls themselves leaned in for the punchline. Mom tried a softer approach, a tone she hadn't used since the days when I was a child begging for a little human warmth. Sometimes independence comes with a cost, she said, as if she'd discovered some ancient proverb over coffee. Independence isn't a cost, I replied. It's the price I've paid to keep my sanity intact. This isn't about you needing space. It's about me needing to breathe without feeling like I'm walking on a minefield. Cody's face turned red, not with anger, but with the realization that my boundaries weren't a joke. He stepped back, the bravado draining from him like a balloon losing air. For a heartbeat, the three of them stood there, the past doing a slow, painful replay in the space between us. Then Mom tried the sacrifice play. We were hoping you'd help us. Look, no, I said, softer now, but firm. I'm not your safety net. I'm not your bank account. I'm not your reconciliation project. If there's any reconciliation, it starts with you acknowledging what happened, not with me feeding you back into a life you walked away from. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It carried years of unspoken apologies, the kind that never arrive because they're too late to fix what's already broken. Cody shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes, and Dad finally looked up, meeting my gaze with something I almost didn't recognize, a flicker of accountability. Mom spoke again, quieter this time, almost a whisper. So what do you want? What did I want? I wanted to protect what I'd built. I wanted to live in a space where I didn't have to second guess every decision, where if I said no, it meant something more than just a word. I wanted them to understand that my success wouldn't be used as a weapon against me. I want boundaries. I said the words crisp, almost clinical but true. I want you to respect the life I've built, even if you don't understand the choices I've made. If you're here to threaten me with assets or leverage, you can leave. If you're here to talk honestly about what you need and why you fell apart, really talk, not bargain, then we can begin. The air shifted. Mom swallowed the tremor in her jaw. Cody looked at the floor, perhaps finally seeing the person I'd become rather than the kid I used to be in their house. Dad exhaled slowly, a man who'd spent years hiding behind the illusion of control and perhaps now realized that control had never belonged to him in the first place. The minutes stretched, and the door remained the only thing between the present and the old life I'd left behind. Finally, Mom spoke again, a guarded sincerity threading through her voice. We'll think about it, she said, not promising anything but signaling a tentative pause in the old script. Good, I answered. Not mean, not cruel, just certain. Think fast. Because I'm not rewriting this story to fit anyone else's ending. They stood, hesitated, then turned toward the door as one, a fractured family moving in silence toward whatever the next moment would bring. I watched them go, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders as the door closed behind them. For the first time in a long time, I exhaled fully and realized something inside me had finally unlocked. The fear of losing them was real, but the fear of losing me was greater. Clarity arrived with the click of the lock. I wasn't going backward. I was moving forward, step by deliberate step toward a life I controlled, a life I'd earned. The moment rang in my ears as I walked back through the apartment, a quiet rhythm of determination. This was the turning point, the line drawn in ink across a page. I was finally ready to write for myself. And as I stood there, I understood that the real victory wasn't beating them at their own game. It was choosing to live honestly as the person I was becoming. The knock on the door wasn't the end of a fight. It was the opening of a door I'd kept shut for years, the one that led to a life where I didn't have to second guess every move. When I closed the door on them, I didn't close the chapter, I turned the page. My condo, bought with late nights, careful budgeting, and a growing reputation for steady, clean design work, became my anchor. It wasn't just a place to sleep, it was a symbol of what happens when you stop letting fear drive the story. I framed every small victory like a building block, each client secured, each late payment avoided, each extra freelance job I took on as a step towards something bigger. Rebecca's faith in me paid off in more ways than one. The lead designer role was the milestone, but the real gain was the sense that I could shape my life with intention rather than reaction. I kept the doors of opportunity open, took on more freelance gigs, and built a cushion that let me breathe. The old life didn't vanish, but its weight grew distant, like a memory you can't quite reach unless you lean in. I still felt the sting of what my family had done. The birth that it became a gravity well pulling at my ankles, but I refused to let that gravity pull me under. I kept reminding myself of the promises I'd made in that motel room the night I decided to claw my way back up. Work hard, save more, set boundaries that couldn't be crossed, and build a life that didn't hinge on someone else's approval. A few months into the new rhythm, Cody reached out. He sounded different, no bravado, no edge, just a kid trying to find a way through a maze his own choices had built. He asked for a favor, a loan for school, something I'd once considered giving blindly. I paused. I thought about the walk we'd taken from the porch to the street that day, the way I'd stood up for myself, the way I'd learned that family isn't a trap if the boundaries are clear. I told him I could help, but with a plan, a repayment schedule, accountability, and the requirement that he show progress in his studies first. It wasn't charity, it was a test, a chance to grow up, to stop leaning on the person who'd finally found his own feet. He agreed, surprised perhaps that I wasn't angry enough to cut him off entirely. We hung up with a last breath of tentative honesty between us. Meanwhile, the legal and financial pieces fell into place. I documented my ownership of the condo, kept my savings intact, and stayed vigilant about anything that might threaten my independence. It wasn't about vengeance, it was about protection, about making sure that what I'd built wouldn't be pulled away by a single bad move or a sour memory. Friends too became essential. Dave and a couple of colleagues checked in, offered places to stay if the need ever arose again, and reminded me that I wasn't alone. I'd built more than a home. I'd built a community that reflected the person I was becoming. Reliable, steady, true to his own standards. And then there was the quiet, stubborn pride that you don't see in every success story. The mornings I woke up and realized I didn't have to pretend anymore, that the last argument with my family wouldn't color every future decision. I started letting myself imagine a future that wasn't scaffolded by fear, the kind of future where a birthday doesn't come with a public humiliation, where family's acceptance isn't the currency that buys my happiness. As the days turned into weeks, the work continued to come, and I found a rhythm I hadn't known in years, a balance between ambition and rest, between the work I did and the life I wanted to live. The condo became more than a shelter. It became a sanctuary that reminded me that resilience isn't a one-time decision, but a daily practice. If there's a final message in this part of the story, it's this. Independence isn't about rejecting family or building a fortress around the heart. It's about choosing to live with intention, to surround oneself with people who lift you up, and to guard the space where your best self can emerge. It's about ending the era of being defined by someone else's expectations and starting the era of defining your own. The journey isn't over, but the direction is clear, and so am I.